I think what marriage does is it brings out what's in. I'm never angry. You know what I mean? Like, I might have even said a few choice words. Take the most annoying, irritating thing that they do, and instead of getting upset at it, just start to relabel it and call it that cute little thing that they do. Conflict isn't the issue, actually. I feel like not repairing is the issue.
Oh, so good. This is therapy speak for me. This is amazing.
This is why I tell you that you should pay me to be your therapist.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. This is The Healthy Christian. I'm Sabrina Peters, psychologist and pastor, passionate about emotional health and spiritual maturity, because the best you is a whole you. Let's check out today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about love and marriage, and who better to have as our guest today than my husband, Ben.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you again.
Are you ready to talk about love and marriage and family? And
I'm ready. I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
Okay, great. I'm glad you're present. You're ready. Someone asked me the other day, actually, if I was the person that initiated our relationship, and I told them no, but I would just love you to clarify that, please.
Well, you need to be honest with the people.
Yes, you do need to be honest.
And the truth is that when Sabrina and I first met, she couldn't take her eyes off me. Soon followed by her hands.
Babe, don't lie. You actually need to tell the truth, and I wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about how we got together as well.
No. I mean, it was probably the opposite, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was. Do you have like a sense of satisfaction when you say that? Like,
kind of, yeah. Because I feel like you were the pursuer, and
absolutely, and I was
just
pursuing.
Like, hey.
I was pursuing someone who was not interested at all, and who in fact said that I was like her brother.
Yeah, you weren't in the friend zone. You were the brother zone.
Yeah, which
time.
Is worse. It's worse. The brother zone is worse than the friend zone for sure. And I was friend zoned so hard that honestly, it's still a testimony of the goodness of God to this day that I was able to get out of that.
Well, look at us now. How long have you been married for?
16 years, almost 17.
Woo-woo.
We made it. Well,
Yeah.
we're making it, praise God.
We're making it. We're still going. Actually, I wouldn't mind just sharing super briefly how we got together, and then we'll jump into some principles that build strong marriages. So do you want to tell the story?
Well, it starts with me
Okay.
because I was in the relationship long before you were.
That's so accurate.
So we met when we were 18.
Yes.
And it was at a youth conference, and I'd had a bit of a come to Jesus moment. I hadn't been living for the Lord really before that very well. And it was this pivotal moment where I'm like, well, do I want to serve God with my life, or do I want to pursue engineering, the degree I was doing? And so I went to a youth conference instead of going to my first year exams as an engineer.
Which still makes me like a bit itchy every time you tell me, as someone who's very studious. The fact that you missed your exams.
I skipped my exams. I went to a conference.
It was the best thing.
A youth conference in Mackay with Pastor Ben Naitoko, and I met the lovely Sabrina. And you were one of a few girls that I'd noticed.
Oh, great.
But
noticed a few.
But what really struck me was when you open your mouth, I could hear the love of God and your wholeheartedness for God. And I'm like, I'd never seen that in a young woman before. And so I'm like, wow, well, who is this? And we kind of connected. I probably shared a little too much of my previous journey. But anyway, I went home from that conference and I said to my parents, I think I found my wife. But anyway, what was it like for you when we met?
Okay, my experience was very different. I vividly recall meeting you because I think that your cousin was flirting with a friend of mine.
That's true, he was.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I remember meeting you.
Wingman.
You were the wingman, and I remember you saying years later, like, you didn't really notice me because I was so short, and then all of a sudden I popped out and was like, hey. And then, you said that before, that when I opened my mouth, something was different, which is very beautiful and encouraging. I do recall going to the mosh pit at this conference, and you and your cousin Clint, who I love, you guys were so rowdy, and you kept jumping on my feet, and I'm 5 foot tall. So I just was thinking to myself, who is this dude? Does he not see me here? I swear he's jumped on my feet 5 times. and you didn't care. So I was a bit like off-put maybe.
Yeah, okay. But we connected. I got
We did.
I got your MSN.
I think
And
you
your
got my home
I
phone
got your
number.
home phone number and your MSN. Yeah. And that's how long ago this was. Chat,
it was.
MSN chat.
And then you rang me at home and
Yeah.
I didn't know who it was.
But needless to say, our experience is very different.
Yes.
And I probably thought that you were as into me as I was you. But that wasn't the case. I didn't find out for more than 18 months, but my feelings, I think, hadn't changed. Like I still was. But by this time, I'd moved to another city, and I was a youth pastor of that city, and the pastor at the time said, you need a girl to help you. You're a 20-year-old man. Now I'm 20. You're a 20-year-old young guy. You need a girl to help you. And you were the first person I thought of, actually.
Is that because you had a crush on me though?
It was probably more like I felt like you were the right person for it.
Oh, that's really sweet.
And you lived in another city, almost 2,000 kilometers away. But I remember, I'm kind of telling your side of the story, but you kind of had this God moment where you felt like God called you to the same church.
Yeah.
So, you came to visit, and I remember finding out that you liked a friend of mine.
Oh man, full disclosure today.
Yeah, you had a crush on, and that was just a knife to the chest, because here I am thinking that we're on the same wavelength, and here you are being a floozy.
I wasn't being a floozy.
You're
I
out
hadn't
there.
even told this person I liked them. But yeah,
you told
I had
me.
feelings.
Yeah.
But I told you because
I asked.
You were like, hey, do you like anyone? And you kept pressing. You're like, do you like anyone? And I was like, oh, fine. I like
You said,
so-and-so.
yeah, you said, yes, there's this guy. And I immediately thought, she's talking about me. But how wrong. And then I'm like, hang on. I saw her with this guy. So I said, is it this guy?
And I said, yeah.
And I'm like, knife to the chest.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was about to tell you that I loved you. I know.
Real premature kind of guy.
I was
Like
over the.
real-
I was off the edge, and I actually had this God moment where I felt like the Holy Spirit just whispered to my heart, and said, Ben, because you were just visiting.
Yes.
Said, Ben, don't tell her that you like her. She's going to move down and be the youth pastor with you. And so I said that instead. I said, hey, I want to pray about you coming to help us with this church. And you kind of freaked out because that's why you'd come, because
Yeah,
you'd
that
had
was
like
the
your own God moment there.
Totally. That was the first time I really felt like I heard the voice of God. And that's when I was living in Cairns. And I just felt this impression of you're going to move to the Gold Coast. You're going to become a part of this church and you're basically going to like go down there. And that was life-changing for me. And I was in the Valley of Decision at the time because I didn't want to leave Cairns. I love Cairns. I loved my church. Honestly, I remember loving the Connect group that I had at the time. It was a bunch of 16, 17-year-old girls. And so I was so invested. So that was a real turning point when you said, I think you should move to the Gold Coast too. I was like, wait, are you joking? Are you for real? Because God had deposited that seed in my heart.
Yeah, and so you moved down a few months later.
yeah.
We worked together for a year.
Yes.
The whole the feelings were worse. Everyone else could see it. You couldn't see it. But I was trying to be obedient to what I felt God had put in my heart to not say anything.
Yeah.
And probably like a year after you'd moved, so now I've just turned 21. I remember really surrendering it to God in this moment. I said, Lord, if you don't want me and Sabrina to get together, that's fine. Or if it's for later, that's okay. But I just need to know, is it now, is it later, or is it never? And I'll obey you. And strangely after that, I had a release. I felt like a release to tell you. And so I told you it didn't go so well, but we don't need to bore the people with the details.
I feel like the details
We don't need to bore the people with the
great,
details.
Juicy
You can add the
parts of the
details.
story.
And so, but after a few days, you kind of came around, we started dating. I think we were married a year later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you like zoomed past.
Well, this is a short podcast.
yeah. That was the 10 minutes. No. I'll say something significant. You did come and say to me, hey, I've got these feelings for you. I feel like you said something along the lines of I've like loved you since I've met you. I'm just going to say that my response was, why are you ruining our friendship?
No, I think it was why you're ruining my life.
Yeah, I was getting to that one.
You're ruining everything because you're like, we can't do ministry together. And by this time we'd
you're
built a
my
really
friend.
we built a really good friendship. We spent
Totally.
I obviously had ulterior motives. We had a very good friendship. We spent time together.
We were best friends.
We worked well together.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were absolutely best friends. And someone asked me the other day, like, hey, why didn't you like him? And I had to clarify, I thought you were amazing. I even remember people saying to me, like, do you think you could marry Ben? And I said back to them, 100%. But he's like my brother. So like, ew. Yeah. So I was like, ew. And so that I think was in my mind that firstly, you were a really, really good friend. And then secondly, at the time, I didn't want to get married young. I had dated someone for a long period of time in high school, 3 years. I really felt like I just wanted to follow God personally. I felt as though I just wanted to be a youth pastor. I loved young people in ministry. So the reason I was so hesitant was more to do with this wasn't in my mind the story I perceived, and far less to do with you, because I always valued you. And I think deep down I, really liked you.
You're just lying to yourself.
I was just so restricted.
Yeah.
I restricted
we got
myself.
married young. You were 21, I was 22. And I talk to people that like get married like in their 30s or, even mid 30s or even older. And I feel like there's pros and cons to both. When you're older, you've sorted your life out. You know what I mean? Like, you know who you are, what you like, what you don't like. I feel like we kind of grew up together.
100%.
Like my first international trip was as a husband. You know what I mean? I've maybe been on one plane before.
You were, I think, like 23 or 22.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so we had all this, we kind of grew up together. We got our first rental, all these sorts of things. And so, and that's come with some challenges, but also some great benefits. Yeah. What do you think? I know you're running this podcast, but what do you think are some of the principles? Obviously, I feel like we've got a pretty great relationship. We still love each other. We still, get down from time to time. I don't know if you could say that.
From time to time.
Pretty regularly. We enjoy each other's company,
Yeah, I
all
agree.
this sort of thing. What do you think are some of the things that help make a healthy marriage, or some of the things that God's taught us over the years that have contributed to that?
Yeah, I think fundamentally commitment and trust are really central and the foundation.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have commitment, it's almost as though there is this instability in the foundation of your marriage, because that brings safety and that that you can grow together, that you can build together. So I think having that sense of commitment, not just to each other, I would say, but really the covenant of marriage. And so having a biblical and kind of Christ-centered approach to our relationship, that keeps us together. That's the glue that keeps us together. And we obviously have to work through wanting to be together and it being healthy. Maybe wanting to be together is the wrong word, more so making it enjoyable to be together and making there this sense of connection, this sense of intimacy, this sense of friendship. So trust and commitment. I think intentionality as well, being intentional and prioritizing our relationship. Obviously, you mentioned that we have kids. Something that we did when we first had children, and we've done it for the last decade, is we prioritize one another, recognizing that we are not just mum and dad, but first and foremost, we're actually husband and wife, or that kind of came before us being mum or dad. And in saying that, we love our kids. We 100% prioritize our children. They're not on the peripheral of our life, but one day they're actually going to grow up and they're going to leave home and it's still going to be us.
Yeah.
Well,
let's talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like that hurts marriages so much.
Yep.
Where they have kids and their whole life becomes around the kids. But then I notice as well, I feel like sometimes people in an unhealthy way make their world their kids as well. And so it's like they don't have a world outside of their children.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we love our kids. We have lots of great time together. But I don't feel like that's the case, with us, where where our children are the most central of central, they're a part of our life. They're not our life. Do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. And even, prefacing the fact that our life is not built on our marriage either. As Christians, as believers, our life is built on Christ, and then all of these other things are additions that our life orbits around our relationship with God. I like what you said, that sometimes people they'll have children and then everything becomes about those kids. I think it's a pretty difficult transition sometimes going from partners to parents, and it's quite easy to be like, okay, everything goes to the children. I recall speaking to a friend years ago, and she, off the cuff kind of said, I haven't been on a date with my husband since we had children, like 5 years. And I was like, oh, why not? Like, don't you want to go out? And she kind of candidly mentioned, I don't know what we would talk about outside of the kids. And I didn't really say anything at the time, but for me, that was a little bit of a concern because you should want to connect. You should want to have conversations. You should want to have a date with your spouse.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think as well, and this is probably getting into a parenting conversation now, but I'll just briefly mention this. I think as well that you have, with our kids, I don't want them to grow up self-centered as well.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to grow up thinking that the world revolves around them. And I want them to experience a big world. And if my kids are my world, then my world's going to be pretty small.
Yeah.
What's comfortable for them?
Yes.
What do they enjoy?
Yeah.
What do they not enjoy? Where do they want to go? Where do they not want to go?
Yeah.
But if our world is the call of God, our relationship with God and wherever He's sending us, and our kids are a part of that, and our marriage is a part of that, our marriage is like a very important foundation stone that it's very difficult to serve God while your marriage is falling apart.
Yeah.
Not that that's the only reason to have a strong marriage, but you kind of need to, you want to prioritize that, But I think, I want our kids to grow up.
Yeah, I was like, your kids.
Got some other.
Yeah.
I want our kids to grow up believing that the world is big, that God has a big plan for them, and they're a part of that, and that we're serving God together. And I want them to be, I think, I've heard you say it, the how you've been successful as a parent is basically if they can kind of do life without you.
Yeah.
And that's really the end goal is independence.
Is their independence.
Yeah.
And there's another way to phrase that, is that parenting is not just raising children, it's actually raising adults.
Yeah.
You want them to be adults that stand on their own 2 feet, that have a level of vision and self-sufficiency when they're adults, because that's appropriate. And obviously you don't treat children in the same way that you would treat an adult, but having that in mind, I think it informs the way that we parent. And obviously we, have younger kids, so an 11-year-old, almost a 13-year-old in a couple of weeks, and we absolutely count it a privilege to be parents. So we don't want to minimize that. I think it just came up, the fact that so often people can not prioritize their spouse. And it's not just about children. To be honest, you can take your focus and your energy and your attention. It could be on your career.
Yeah.
It could be on your ministry if you're a pastor. And I think that's problematic when pastors love the church and the house of God more than they love their own families. I personally think that's problematic. Now, can we love both at the same time? 100%.
Yeah.
And we should. So we should love our spouses, our family, our children. But it's like this outer layer that the church is loved well because we've loved our family well. We don't give our family the leftovers or the, dregs of our time and our life, but it also means we live outside of the home too.
Yeah.
Benny, another
Yes.
question. What other principles or practical tips do you have for making a marriage, I suppose, healthy and fun and keeping the spark alive?
Yeah, I think That's great. Great question. I think you've kind of touched on it, just prioritizing. I know that is like large and almost a generic answer.
Yeah, give me some specifics.
Well, I mean, go away for a couple of nights, if you can't afford that, go camping for a couple of nights, whatever. Like just prioritizing that time. I remember
connection, really, right?
I remember when our kids were little, like we went away on a couple of holidays without them, little short ones. And, just finding those times throughout the year, because the years fly.
Yeah.
And just finding those times, go out to dinner, every week or two, Again, it's not even about, well, we don't have the funds or whatever, we can't afford this. I think that you can do, I think that it can be a walk in a park.
Yeah, I love that you said that. We do that.
Yeah, like we'll go for a walk in the park and we'll just get a couple of coffees and we'll walk around, And so it's just that intentionality. We just often sit out on our balcony. I say, "Oh, you're free for a coffee? We should have a coffee." We just sit out there, we chat, and so I just think being intentional with time. I think one of the biggest things. This is probably not what makes a marriage healthy, but what enables a marriage to be healthy in some senses is having a really you've got to become someone that forgives really quickly.
Yeah.
And you've got to be someone that forgives as your default, like regularly. I remember talking to another psychologist, not you, and I just asked him. I said, "How much of your work do you think is helping people with the wounds and the pain that have been caused from parenting and family?" And he thought about it and he started saying 70%, 80%. And he's been a psychologist for years, decades.
Yeah, he has decades.
And then he started, even 80, 90%. And I think that marriage falls into that because you actually have the opportunity to hurt each other more than anyone else, but also to be offended more easily than anyone else. Because you could do that little thing that you do that frustrates me, and you're not doing it against me, but I've taken it as and it's something you've done against me. You could just be cleaning, or you could just be like
putting keys away, which I do.
So you could be doing that little thing that you do where you hide things.
No, I'm cleaning.
Yes, she cleans, she puts things away. I call it hiding. She calls it cleaning. No one can find it. And every time you do that, when you're doing that, you're not thinking, I'm going to upset my husband, I'm going to frustrate. But I can add all those up, and it happens 30 times a year. And now we've been married 50. For 50 times a year. And now we've been married this long. And now it's like, oh my gosh, that's almost 1,000 times you've done this, And so I can add that up as micro offenses. And now I've built this.
That's a great way.
This whole thing. I've built this whole story that she hates me because she keeps doing, or she doesn't respect me because she keeps doing. And I've asked her so many times. And actually, a funny thing, we don't do it that much, but we talked about this a few years back. You can kind of take the sting out of things by calling them. Say.
Cute little things.
Take the most frustrating thing your spouse does. Take the most annoying, irritating thing that they do. And instead of getting upset at it, just start to relabel it and call it that cute little thing that they do. And it just changes the dynamic of it, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, my wife's just done that cute little thing that she does where she hides my keys. Oh, well, here we go. How am I going to get to work?
I do that.
But it's just a way of reframing it. And also in a way like protecting myself from being offended again in the future or hurt again in the future.
Yep.
We create a movie and this is what, when you do this is what it means to me. And it's not true. We've made it up.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's so good. I want to frame it in a little bit of a different way because you're using language I feel like you relate to. So many of these things would fit into a model of therapy called Gottman's method of therapy.
I've always said
or couples therapy.
I've always said I'm the therapist.
Yeah. You do tell me sometimes that you should be charging me.
You should be paying me.
And I'm like, no, you're just my spouse, babe.
Yeah, anyway, we'll get back to that.
The reason I bring that up is there's a few different parts of Gottman's method of couples therapy. It's called the positive perspective. So it's having that perspective of your spouse where you do show grace, where you do forgive, where overall you're focusing more on their positive attributes than their failures or their disappointments or their frustrations towards you. And so that's a really fundamental building block. Another one that you mentioned.
That's just really important, isn't it? And that comes down to gratitude. That comes down to thankfulness to God. That comes down to, I feel like that is super key. Like you could have two people or two marriages that have the same issues here as this married couple over there.
Yeah.
This one is blissfully married, loving every moment of it. This one is hating it, considering divorce. They have the same set of issues, but this one is more focused on what they love about their spouse, and this one is more focused. I mean, it's so easy to look at your spouse through the lens of a black shadow over them.
Yeah.
You always, you never, you've never changed that. That's really powerful.
Yeah. It's great. So the positive perspective is part of the sound house model. Another element of that is literally this premise of responding to your partner's bids for connection. And so you mentioned even the fact that we go for walks and stuff, but it's not just about those formal where we're having a date or whatever. It's when your spouse says, "Hey, how was your day, honey?" And they're trying to draw you in. We even sometimes use that language now, and you'll say, "I'm bidding for you."
I don't know if I've ever said I'm bidding.
You've said before, "This is my bid," because you've been like, "Hey, can we go sit out?" And I'm like, "I'm really busy." No, and you're like, "You have." Yeah. You stand corrected.
As per usual.
But the bids for connection have a lot to do with turning towards your partner instead of away from. And if you think about it, over years or decades, if your default is to turn away from a person, there is a large emotional gap there. And so people can be in a marriage or in a relationship and they can feel like a single person, or they can feel like a lonely person. And so it is very important to kind of recognize, now you can't, respond to a bid for connection every time. I just used that example. Once you said, "Hey, let's go have a coffee." And I feel like I was in study mode and work mode. And I was like, I don't have time. But the majority of us wanting to connect with one another, I would say we do our best to respond to those bids and we turn towards each other. Hey, do you want to go on a date? Do you want to have a walk? Do you want to sit outside while the kids do the dishes? And it's actually about connection.
Hang on. People are going to think we've got little servant children.
No, they're not.
We're just teaching them good chores.
Yeah. That's
right. No, I think that's great. And I suppose as well, obviously we haven't talked about it, but the bids for sexual connection.
Yeah.
It's not just emotional. I think for men that is often the thing that's number one on their mind. And I know and I don't, like, it's a bit of a generalization, but sometimes, there is a desire in the ladies for more of that emotional conversation or things like that.
Sure.
That's a higher need than
big generalization.
Big generalization. But men are like, "Hey, we haven't, done this or whatever. I've got this thing."
What are you talking about?
Well, you know what I'm talking about. And is this PG? I don't know. And so sometimes that can be a tension. But I feel like it's all serving one another, loving one another. I come back to that thing where Jesus said, Paul said, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave his life up for her. And I feel like there's a service element to having a healthy marriage. There's a preferring element. There's a, hey, I'm going to prefer you right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes, actually, we had a counselor tell us this. She said, compromise is no good because nobody wins.
Yeah.
Well, I want to watch an action movie and you want to watch a rom-com, so we're going to watch a romantic action movie. Like, neither of us got what we want. But if it's like, well, no, you want this and I want this, so I'm going to prefer you.
Yeah.
So it's me serving you.
Okay, we are going to jump into conflict and handling conflict because I feel as though conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional within a relationship. Oh, you like that?
Is combat optional though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But can you talk about you can talk about us, you can talk about handling conflict well, not handling it well. You can share about, I think, our faux pas over the years if you want to.
Well, I think conflict isn't the issue, actually. Mm-hmm. I feel like not repairing is the issue.
Oh, that's so good. Babe.
The issue isn't did you have an argument?
Yeah.
The issue is did you resolve it?
This is therapy speak for me. This is amazing.
This is why I tell you that you should pay me to be your therapist.
Sorry, I interrupted. Go.
No, but that's the issue. That's the issue with families and children as well. The issue isn't that you said or did something, or you made a mistake as a parent. The issue is did you resolve it? Did you fix it? Did you apologize to your kids? Did you talk to them? And it's the same in a marriage.
Yeah.
You're going to have arguments. In fact, I've got a few friends now that have been divorced, and at the time they were saying that they had never had an argument. They'd never had a fight. I've heard you say this, that some therapists refuse to take on couples clients that don't fight because it's like, well, they're too far gone. If because fighting and arguing, at least it shows you're both interested
Still in the relationship.
Yeah, and it's and sure you can have too much of that.
Sure, definitely.
You can be overdoing it, all that sort of thing. But you just want to be good at fixing it, and you want to be good at and as well. I've come to learn that just because I want to fix it right now doesn't mean that it needs to be fixed. And I've also learned that just because I think it needs to be fixed doesn't always mean it needs to be fixed, because our communication style is very different.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, my wife is half German and half Maori. And so there's a lot of passion in her DNA and blood. And
it's a bit spicy.
It's a bit spicy. But the Lord knew I needed a spicy woman. There's lots of great attributes in that. And I can for sure be passive and all sorts of things. And so it's a good contrast. And you don't want to marry someone that's the same as you. You know, what's the benefit of that?
Yeah.
And so, but our argument style is very different.
Yeah.
And I've had to reframe, I think, what you speaking aggressively means. And you'll be like, I'm not arguing. I'm not fighting. I'm not even mad.
No, I would usually say, I'm not even angry.
Okay. The way you said that I would love it if that's how you argued with me, but it's not, and that's okay. But for sure, in your heart and mind, you can always go up from there. And I'm like, this is already up. This is already.
Yes.
And so we're just different in how we communicate. And well, I suppose that's another big thing in marriage, which we could cover, is that, don't make your marriage about trying to change your spouse.
Yeah.
You're never going to let the Lord do that.
Yeah.
You focus on yourself. Focus on. And so even me trying to force you to change your communication style, which I have done over the years quite a few times, it's never really worked. But if I leave it to the Lord and you've got a good relationship with God, which you do, and you've got a humble, that does help.
Yeah.
But I've also had to learn that, okay, I've had to repaint what that means when it happens. Maybe instead of thinking Sabrina doesn't love me, instead of thinking she's so angry at me right now, instead of thinking this is her dishonoring me again, instead of thinking all of these things, I'm like, she might be stressed. Are you okay, sweetheart?
Yeah.
What's going on? And sometimes, it is, you might be angry at me, or you might have a bit of a funk attitude. We all do at times. I need you to help me with that. At times you need, that's the beauty of a marriage, is that you can help each other when you get stuck, and that can for sure happen. But I've had to not take offense to that so much. And a part of that is some of the healing that God's done in my life. Part of that is some of, I would even say, the deliverance that God has done in my life, where He set me free from some thought patterns and some things. But yeah, you want to be good at healing, and you want to be good at coming back together. That
conflict resolution, right? I appreciate what you said there, that it's not necessarily about having no conflict, because that is unrealistic. And healthy couples will have as much kind of disagreement or micro offenses. There might be as much disappointment, hurt, things like that. But really, it's when there's a rupture, it's the way that you repair that matters. So it's forgiving one another. It's taking ownership. You know, you kind of mentioned times when I might be angry or aggressive. I feel as though over the years we've become way better and way quicker at taking ownership of our actions and then apologizing to one another. And I still notice that you get shocked, like when I will either apologize or say, I'm really sorry that I said something like this. And you'll be like, oh, babe. And I'm like, I'm growing, I'm changing. Like, I want to be the best wife that I can be. I want to be the best mum, best pastor. And so, yeah, getting back to that conflict, it is about repairing after those moments. That is the critical moment of a relationship. It's not, did you get to a point where you had a fight or you had a disagreement? And obviously we're not talking about the nth degree, so that spectrum of where there's emotional abuse or violence or anything. We're not addressing that. That's a different issue and needs to be handled very differently. We're kind of talking about, you know, that middle ground of you're just getting frustrated at one another, you're arguing or you're bickering. Those moments we want to see repair and resolve, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we should say as well, like, that we have had some very big fights over the years, and some that have, if anybody saw a snapshot of that fight, they would be like, that's awful, that's abusive, this or that or whatever. And I mean, we're not sitting here saying, oh, we have this perfect marriage, you know what I mean, or that we have everything together, or, or whatever. But even in those difficult times, we worked through it, even if it wasn't straight away.
Yeah.
You know, even if it was the next day or over the next few days, that was always the goal for us, was to fix it. And our first year of marriage,
I'm recalling, like,
I can see it. I can see it on your face. Our first year of marriage was wild.
I'm like, you're making us sound
no,
so
you've got to be honest with people.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were young. We were young. We were 21,
actually,
22
in the early years.
And we got married young, and we just didn't know that we just were coming from totally different family dynamics. I don't think we didn't know anything about counseling, psychology, and even all the wholeness stuff that we've been,
wholeness.
you know, we didn't know anything about that. And so we're just like, this behavior needs to stop. And we're just doing that to each other.
You're pointing fingers, really.
Yeah, pointing fingers. But he just kept on going and going. I remember one night, you jumped out of a window.
Wait, you need to give the context of that.
I was quoting the scripture and saying, you should not let the sun go down in your wrath. And you're like, I'm done talking about this.
Yeah.
We've been fighting for a couple of hours. I think. And you're like, I'm done talking about this. And I'm like, no, we will not. And I'm like blocking the door. And we don't need to mention the next part. You know what?
You just said it. So you just said it.
Yeah, you jumped out of the window, and it was dangerous.
It was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life.
We live 5 stories up. Yeah. You jump from the window to the balcony. She's a gymnast. You know, you coped with it, but like, I think we both realized, oh my gosh, what are we doing?
Yeah, and can I just hit the pause there for a second? That was a moment, I think, of dysfunction and emotional immaturity and not really having the skills to work through conflict. So as you said, we had been kind of bickering for a couple of hours. Some stuff had happened, and you stood in front of the door, and I was like, I'm going to go to the next room. Like, I'm emotionally spent. And you stood in front of the door. You're a big, strong guy. And I am small but pugnacious at times. And I was like, you better let me out of the door, man. And you didn't. And I was like, if you're not going to let me out of the door, I'm going out the window. And it was such an irrational, ridiculous choice that in hindsight, I deeply regret. But I just climbed out the window and I kind of cartwheeled to the balcony. And then we actually did talk after that. And I think I was so shaken up, and you were like, you could have died. And it was a real kind of whiplash moment, and it took us out of it. Now, you know, that's 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I think we handle conflict radically differently, but I would reflect on that and go, I didn't have the skills to manage conflict well. I'd never had them shown to me, modeled to me, and I was dysfunctional at the core. So I felt like I just had things going on in my internal world, and the external just exacerbated them. And I'm grateful that I no longer jump out of windows.
Well,
I'm actually a really good couples
we now bought
therapist.
a single story home to make sure.
Don't lie. Everyone's going to watch this and be like, oh, great. We're going to go talk to Sabrina about our marriage issues. Great.
No, but you want to be real with people and let them know that you don't have it all together.
Yeah,
but we're
100%.
growing, and I think that's the big thing is that we do things differently now.
Yes.
But still, we can have some really big arguments, and I'll go to God and I'm God, I'm frustrated. I remember not maybe 6 months or so ago, I was so upset about something. I can barely remember what it was. And I went to the Lord and I'm like, God, you got to change this, this, and this, and I'm going to tell her this. And he just said, Ben, when you calm down, I need to talk to you about something. And he just tore strips off me in the loving, gracious way that he could.
Yeah.
But he was just basically forget about her spec, focus on this log. And it was painful, but it was also a time where I grew. And it has even that conversation, we've had quite a few conversations out of that, and that's actually changed our marriage.
Yeah.
So you're not looking for perfection, you're just looking for progress.
Yeah, and direction.
Yeah,
the direction that you're facing.
Yeah, you want God to change you, and you don't need to wait till you're perfect until you get married, and you don't need to separate for 5 years until you act together, then come back together.
Yeah.
You can have a growing, healthy-ish relationship while he's working on you. But I think what marriage does is it brings out what's in.
Yeah.
And I remember being shocked when we got married early days that I was angry because I'm like, I'm never angry. You know what I mean? Like I might have even said a few choice words, excuse me. And I'm like, what? I don't even speak like this. You are making me. And then you were probably similarly saying you are making me.
Yeah.
And realizing, well, marriage actually, it's beautiful and it's awesome, but it also applies pressure.
Yeah.
And when you apply pressure to something, what's inside of it comes out.
It's like that toothpaste illustration of it. You're in close proximity to somebody else. You see the good, the bad, the ugly, and it squeezes out everything that's inside. And like you said, it's this paradox of it can be so fulfilling and beautiful and equally as frustrating and challenging, but it squeezes it out. I actually get this sense that it squeezes sometimes the things out of us that God wants to change.
Yeah.
And so it becomes our senior pastor, Pastor Mark, always says discipleship happens best within marriage. Like it is the best form of discipleship because you're in such close quarters with somebody. So it really does have the potential to make us more Christ-like, to refine us. I personally think it brings a lot of stability, joy, safety, friendship, exhilaration to a person's life as well. So it has all of those difficult elements alongside. I love being married. You say it's easy for me to be married though. So
no,
I was like, yeah, babe.
Yeah, you do have a really great spouse.
I do have a good spouse, but you're supposed to say you have a
fantastic
good spouse.
I have a fantastic spouse. It's just that, one of us is a little easier. That's all.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a handful sometimes.
But you're my handful.
Yeah.
You're my handful. You're probably at least 2 handfuls.
Yeah.
But you're what I need,
Yeah.
And the Lord knew that. And the Lord knew that I needed someone with a bit of fire and a bit of spice. And so much good has come from my life with that. Now, I don't think I'd be the man that I am today, managing the things that I manage and stewarding the things that God's given us. I think so much of that has come from even some of the pressure and even some of the difficulties that we've had and that we've overcome. So, yeah.
All right. That is wrapping up today's episode, speaking about marriage. I think we should get you back and talk more about love, and maybe we'll talk about parenting and family. But thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
And we will definitely talk more soon. Thank you for tuning in to The Healthy Christian. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let's get healthy together.